Okay. All right.
Everything's great except for that.
Except for the TV. Yep. I'm muted.
If you want me, like, I don't know what, like, move it up or down.
Okay, yeah, for sure, thank you.
All right.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Please silence your cell phones to minimize distractions during the meeting. When the chair calls for public comment, please approach the podium to indicate you wish to speak. Virtual participants should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak during public comment. Once your name is called, please unmute and turn on your camera to provide your comments. Please state your name and zip code before speaking. The city reserves the right to turn off videos or mute participants. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes. The primary format for accessing and participating in this meeting is in person at City Hall. Virtual access to view or participate in the meeting cannot be guaranteed. The chat function will not be monitored for this meeting. If you have any trouble, the meeting can be viewed on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. I will now turn the meeting back over to the chair.
All right, welcome to the April meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Let's first start with a roll call to determine quorum.
Yes, good evening, board members. Palos,
Here?
Peterson,
Here.
Rankin,
Here.
Shalinski,
Here.
Shanuda,
Here.
Sinkler,
Here.
Watkins,
Here.
and we do have quorum. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Catherine. Moving along to next item, communication. Is there any communication to come before the board?
We have no additional communications that are not in the packet.
Thank you. Do any board members have any communication to disclose over specific agenda items?
I do not.
I don't.
All right. Any agenda items to be deferred?
We have no items to be deferred this evening.
Excellent. Let's continue down the agenda. Our first item is to consider the approval of minutes from the February 2nd, 2025 meeting of the board.
I'll move approval.
Second.
The agenda item is the February minutes, but the attachment was the January minutes. So I don't feel like I can approve something that I haven't seen.
That is,
And if we're really doing the January ones, I'm going to have to abstain because I was absent for that meeting.
Good eye.
yeah, that is the attached minutes are from the January 2nd meeting. I think it's just mislabeled here in our agenda as February 2nd.
Yeah, we would be looking at the minutes that are attached, so.
So the board will look at the January 2nd, 2025.
I also will be abstaining as I was not present for that meeting.
I was in attendance, so I would move to approve the minutes from January 2nd meeting.
I'll second that.
All right, staff, you want to, can we just do a,
Yeah, we can do a hand raise for the vote when you're ready to take a vote.
all right.
I'm seeing 4. And the motion carries. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the public hearing. We have a variance number BZA 25-0002. Staff, would you like to present?
Yes. So good evening, board members. Drew Bilby with planner with the Planning and Development Services Department. As Chair Rankin noted, this public hearing item is for BZA-25-0002, which is a variance request to exceed the existing overage of off-street parking amount for a neighborhood religious institution use from the code required 150 spaces to 310 spaces. The subject property is addressed as 700 Wakarusa Drive. Section 20-901D2C of the Land Development Code states that parking spaces provided per use may range from 90% to 110%. 310 spaces represents 207% of the code required spaces for a neighborhood religious institution use. An applicant is allowed to request a waiver from the planning director when exceeding the range allowed in Section 20-901D2C. However, the planning director did not feel comfortable granting an administrative waiver of such a large overage and wanted the Board of Zoning Appeals to hear the case. I will now briefly run through the 5 review criteria for variances. Criteria 1 focuses on unique conditions based in plating or zoning. The variance originates from the applicant's desire to add additional parking to service the existing use on site, as they claim there is not enough parking at this time for their need. Staff believes the subject property's physical conditions, while increased in area, lot frontage, and width, are not unique to other neighborhood religious institution use sites in Lawrence. None of these are conditions of uniqueness that would constitute granting this variance. To conclude this section, staff believes the subject property does not exhibit conditions of uniqueness based in both plating and zoning, and thus does not meet criteria number 1. Criteria number 2 is the potential adverse effects upon the rights of adjacent property owners and/or residents. In staff's opinion, the requested variance would not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners or residents. There has been no written communications stating their denial of this variance. So the variance request meets criteria 2. Criteria 3 is for unnecessary hardship. In staff's opinion, strict adherence to the code required off-street parking standards could constitute an unnecessary hardship. When this site was first developed in 1989, Section 20-901D2C did not exist in the then applicable zoning code. This meant there was no maximum amount of parking spaces a site could provide. That is why the site was permitted to expand their parking with the site plan in 2008 to increase from 151 spaces to 229. In 2020, a text amendment was approved for Article 9 of the Land Development Code that established the range of parking allowed on a site. With the current site plan application, the site is required to follow this code section. Staff will also note that the site is currently fully code compliant, and granting a variance could be seen as accommodating a specific land use in the site's existing neighborhood religious institution use. Staff finds the variance request does meet criteria 3. Criteria 4 is the adverse effects on public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare. In staff's opinion, requiring on-street parking and/or parking in areas that are nearby, and thus requiring pedestrians to walk to the subject property, could adversely affect the public's health, safety, and convenience. The site has space for the additional parking and would still be below the maximum impervious coverage that is allowed in the RM12 zoning district, which is 75%. The proposed additional parking brings the site's total impervious coverage to 65%. The site is also proposing a stormwater retention basin to alleviate the increased stormwater runoff that would come with the additional impervious coverage. Granting this variance would allow the subject property to maintain its parking fully inside its property boundaries and reduce the need for the public to cross West Harvard Road or Wakarusa Drive. Staff finds this variance request meets criteria 4. Criteria 5 is the general spirit and intent of the code. In staff's opinion, granting the variance request to exceed the maximum off-street parking amount would not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the Land Development Code. Section 20-901A of the Land Development Code notes the purpose of the parking, loading, and access standards as methods to ensure that off-street parking, loading, and access demands of various land uses will be met without adversely affecting the safety of pedestrians and motorists, both within the site and surrounding areas. As noted before, staff does not believe the requested increased parking would adversely affect the Wakarusa Drive or West Harvard Road rights-of-way and/or the adjacent detached dwelling and multi-dwelling land uses. This section of the Land Development Code is generally satisfied. Staff also believes the proposed variance satisfies the purpose of the variance process as stated in Section 20-1309A. Granting this variance would be in line with the intent of the variance process, which is to mitigate unnecessary hardships caused by literal enforcement of the zoning standards. Staff recognizes the subject's the property's parking problems as documented. The literal enforcement of the parking maximum could be considered an unnecessary hardship, as the amount of cars the neighborhood religious institution draws could be higher than what the code accounts for. The purpose of the variance process is equalize the process of development and permit development of a property that is so unique based on platting or zoning that the code's restrictions make it impossible to develop or use otherwise in a code-compliant manner. The addition of parking spaces could be seen as the site continuing its use as a neighborhood religious institution and not necessarily increasing the intensity of development or use on the site. The existing structure on the site has not been expanded since its original construction, yet more parking has been needed throughout its history. This could signify that the Land Development Code does not accurately measure the parking required for neighborhood religious institution use. Per section 20-901D3, when parking is provided over the 110% maximum range of the parking required in section 20-902, the impacts of the increased impervious surface shall be mitigated through the use of storm drainage best management practices. This addition of parking would also require storm drainage best management practices. Staff finds that this variance request generally meets criteria 5. To conclude, staff recommends denial of the variance request from section 20-901D2C of the Land Development Code for the property located at 700 Wakarusa Drive based on the findings in the staff report, concluding that the request does not meet all 5 criteria outlined in section 20-1309G1. And with that, I will finish my presentation and am here for questions.
All right, thank you. Do any board members have questions for staff?
I do. Excuse me, I do. This will require a site plan review as well?
The site plan is currently under review right now. So
It's under review.
yeah, so basically it came to our department last year.
I got you.
And it's been in the review process. And so this variance is
So it's
part
on
of that.
hold until we get through this process.
That's correct.
My question is about parking maximums. The one thing that is unique about this is that I've been on this board for like over 5 years, and this is the first time anyone has wanted to build more parking spaces rather than trying to get out of the required minimum. So that's pretty different for me. The question is, I think you said there was no maximum until 2021. And is this under the old code or under the new code? Does the parking maximum change with the code that's going into effect, or I don't know if it is pending in a few days or if it happened a couple days ago. I know it's April sometime.
Yes, so the new code is live as of April 1st. So this is being reviewed under the old code though, because the site plan was submitted under the old code. So these requirements for the parking maximum is under our old code. For the new code, just as a aside, it's carrying over essentially the same wording. So the old code that this is being reviewed under was 1 parking space per 4 seats in the sanctuary. So there are 600 seats in the sanctuary, so the required parking is 150 spaces. In the new code, it carries that same language over, but it also adds or 5 per 1,000 square feet of general floor area. 5 per 1,000 square feet of general floor area would be 106. And so in the code, it says whichever is greater, so it would be the 150. And so it's essentially the same amount of parking maximum for both codes.
Thank you.
Is any credit given to the educational use or the school use, or is it all calculated as assembly, spaces in the assembly room?
Yeah, it's essentially just in the sanctuary, or in this case, in the new code, it calls it as general assembly space.
Is that common to only apply it to that primary use? It seems like one of the comments seen in the packet is that talking about services plus educational time, and that's, I mean, seems like maybe the crux of the problem is that we're calculating the parking based upon one of multiple uses.
You go ahead.
Okay. It is common, if those uses are considered accessory uses to the principal use, which in this case they are. If, for instance, it was a mixed-use structure that has multiple principal uses, then it would be calculated differently. Each principal use would have its own calculation based on the requirements in the code. So this is pretty common for a use that does have ancillary uses or secondary uses. So,
And to confirm, of the 5 elements, it meets 4 under the staff's report, but the first element of being a unique property or something uniqueness to the property, that's the one that staff couldn't find in this analysis.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, it's uniqueness in platting and zoning. So it essentially talks about the lot itself.
Any other questions for staff?
And just to confirm, though, the ask is to move from 229 spaces to 310, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, they are currently providing 229, but the proposed is 310. 150 just signifies the maximum currently by code.
Okay.
All right, if that's all questions for staff, I believe we have the applicant here.
Good evening, Board. I'm Corby Rust with Land Plan Engineering, 66049. And I have been working on the site plan for the expansion of this Rev City Church parking lot for several months now. We are basically through the review phase with this. We've received comment response and we have responded, and we are to the point where it is just waiting on this issue to be solved. I've been in this line of work in Lawrence for 5 years, and it's my experience also that clients typically wish to avoid adding parking due to costs, site area constraints, and the pains associated with the process of getting things passed. City code requires substantial asphalt and base layers, curb and gutter, interior and exterior landscaping, stormwater treatment for both water quality and quantity, and oftentimes heavily landscaped buffer yards. This situation is different. Rev City is much in need of additional parking. They are prepared for the cost, have the necessary area, and are nearing the end of this process. You'll hear from Pastor Humphreys momentarily to further elaborate on the needs. As you heard, code requires 150 parking stalls and limits us to 165 with the percent overages. The 229 stalls that are existing are not enough, and our site plan does propose 310, which is 83 more. 85 of those are in the new parking area, and there was some reconfiguration, so it's a little confusing, but 83 additional spots. As you heard, a variance request for parking overage was submitted along with the site plan. This request outlined the church's necessity for additional parking and included pictures taken of the persistent problem. Vehicles parked along curbs and not in stalls, vehicles parked in paved areas not meant for parking, up near the basketball court, that kind of thing. Vehicles parked in grassy areas beyond the curb. Vehicles parked along Harvard Road, and vehicles parked in adjoining neighborhoods. These issues created a serious safety concern for the churchgoers not fortunate enough to arrive in time for a parking stall. This variance request was denied by the planning director. I want to take a moment to discuss what I believe to be the highlights of the submitted site plan. Several careful and logical decisions were made in creating this plan. The proposed additional pavement is in the southwest corner of the church's property, at the corner of Wakarusa Drive and Harvard Road, away from the residential area to the east and across the street from other residential areas. This keeps the proposed lighting from any impact to nearby residential property. New access points to either Wakarusa or Harvard are not being added. No new access points. Currently, all stormwater runoff from the parking lot moves south to Harvard Street and then towards Wakarusa to an inlet on the north side of Harvard. The new parking area collects runoff in a bioretention basin before it enters the stormwater network. That's a new thing Lawrence is doing, and it's good. And this is one of the first projects I've worked on that addresses the stormwater need to improve quality and quantity. The new parking lot landscaping and additional buffer yard provides 18 newly planted trees along with 153 shrubs. That includes the buffer yard that is along Wakarusa Drive. So as you're driving Wakarusa, there's going to be rows of shrubs and trees, and you're not going to see a sea of concrete. You're going to see beautiful trees and shrubs, and Rev City Church does a wonderful job of maintaining their property and taking care of their trees. Also, Rev City maintains all the beautiful green space to the east and north side of the church. We are asking the board this evening to approve a requested variance for Rev City per section 20-1309 of the Land Development Code of the City of Lawrence. I say this request absolutely arises from such conditions that are unique to the property in question and not ordinarily found in the same zoning. Rev City Church is a popular place on Sundays, during summer programs, and at other times throughout the year. Parking stalls should be available for all. Granting a variance would absolutely not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners. Rather, it would solve potential effects to the surrounding areas by heavily reducing, if not eliminating, on-street parking. Strict application of the provisions absolutely constitutes unnecessary hardship upon Rev City and its congregation. You'll hear more about that shortly. I cannot think of a single scenario where the requested additional parking would adversely affect public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare of the community. Granting the variance would require, or would be well within the general spirit of this chapter. Thank you, and now you'll hear from Pastor Humphreys of Rev City Church.
Good evening, board. My name is Thomas Humphreys, zip code 66049. And first of all, thank you for your service to our community. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. And I'll endeavor to keep my comments brief. As much of what I'd like to reiterate, I shared in a memo to the board this week. And the main thing is just to reiterate that this is a present tense need that we are facing. It's a good problem to have for a church. But we would generally like to avoid investing money in parking or pavement and invest them in programming. But we're to the point now where it's a continual problem with overflow parking and with people being forced to park on adjacent streets, on green space. And that's not something that we would like to happen into the future. We would like to rectify that and address it. I will bring attention to the fact that our attendance when experiencing these overflow conditions has generally been between 400 and 450 adults in the room that is built to occupy 600 adults. And so there's still a situation that we could experience as we continue to hopefully experience numerical growth where we could experience an even more exacerbated parking situation. So while we're experiencing a real-time present tense issue, there is even the potential, if there's continual growth, we do offer multiple services, 2 services on Sunday morning, a young adult service on Friday nights, a high school student service on Sunday evenings. So we've endeavored to create more programming that maybe alleviates the problem, but it's continued to be an issue on Sunday mornings. All that to say that there's an opportunity that it could become even more exacerbated, or when we have a one-time event, i.e. a concert or a marriage conference or something that gathers the people collectively in one moment, that's when we experience an even greater degree of overflow parking conditions. I would echo one thing that I mentioned in the comments and that I heard mentioned earlier in the comments from city staff, and thank you to you guys as well. And that was a comment that it's possible that the existing code maybe is not accurately addressing today's cultural conditions. And I think that's one thing that we've likely experienced, and that is that with fewer people, maybe more single adults, fewer people being married at an early age, we're experiencing a smaller number of congregants per parking space needed or per vehicle in attendance. There's also many families who attend at different times because they serve in different capacities. And so a family of 5 could sometimes have 2 or 3 vehicles if they have a couple of teenagers. We've encouraged carpooling and asked people to be mindful of that, but it's continued to be an issue. So thank you for your consideration. We will, in line with Corby's comments, endeavor to meet all the requirements that the city would have and ensure that the parking is conducted in a way that is as aesthetically pleasing to the community and the passer, those who pass by on both Harvard and on Wakarusa Drive. Thank you, board.
All right, any board members have any questions for the applicant?
Corby, I got a question for you. Have you been given recommendation if you're not able to get the variance, what would be the path forward for the church?
It's simply no parking lot.
And then, okay.
That's to my knowledge.
Okay. Is there,
Since it's already over, there's no like meet in the middle kind of situation. It's just nothing.
theoretically, Catherine, this one's direct for you. I mean,
Okay.
theoretically, text amendment would be available, but is there another route that you see on this?
No. The first route obviously was a request for the waiver, and just due to the nature of the number, the size of the number, that's, the planning director wasn't comfortable giving the waiver for that large of an overage, which is why you're seeing it now. The point about, that Drew has made about, potentially this code doesn't anticipate the actual number of assembly individuals in this particular use. Because this is a first kind of ask, we don't really have a history of this type of ask. It's not something that maybe was identified prior to the new code development. And so this is something that probably wouldn't have been addressed with the adoption of the new land development code. So this is kind of, that first look of an instance where perhaps the code is not functioning in conjunction with what the actual use requires. And this use was built under the previous code. So, yes, you're right about the text amendment will be the path forward, but I did just want to identify that, neither this code that we're reviewing it under now or the future code really anticipated this situation because it hasn't, we don't have a history of these types of requests before.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up on that, trying to understand, and this is not one of our criteria to consider, but the policy for a parking maximum theoretically would be, you don't necessarily want to pave everything, but we also have other regulations that restrict people from putting in too much impervious surface. Can you help me understand what policy might be there?
Well, just some insight on the new code, which does have maximums in it. I think the new code was trying to get at a balance between less demand for parking in respect of sensitive lands that might be present on parcels, and having some flexibility where individuals don't want to, provide the, large numbers of parking on their site. And so there's the maximum were placed to kind of guide as as reviewers that maybe those large numbers of parking are not necessarily required. This is kind of the opposite situation. And as I mentioned, we haven't seen this one before. Maybe clarify your question a little bit more and I can,
That's enough for me.
okay.
I have a question for staff. Looking at the pictures, we have a lot of cars parked on the grass. Is that technically a violation of allowable land use on this property for cars to be parked in a non-designated planted area?
Yes. So by code standards, parking has to occur on an improved and paved surface. There are various different types of surfaces that they could be on, but they're all essentially paved. So yes, this would be considered in violation when they are parking on the grass. And so that was part of in the staff report that that I mentioned with the possible reason to grant this variance would be because it would eliminate any code violations occurring because they would not be parking on grass anymore. They would be parking on approved surfaces.
Thank you.
I have a question for either applicant or Mr. Humphries. Is this problem only happening during the crossover time between one service letting out and another service getting in?
No, it's generally happening in our 11 a.m. service, which is our most heavily attended service. And so no doubt it's occurring in the crossover time, but it's also present during the 11 o'clock service that runs from 11 to approximately 12:15.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions?
Well, I just want to comment that I know how how the uniqueness of the property is structured. And there's plenty of room for this, and it meets all the normal conditions, but at the same time, it's not satisfying what I think is truly a public health safety issue, is you got people parking on the street. That happens all the time. I live on Tennessee Street. I know how dangerous that can be. And if there's a way to prevent that, I think that's something that ought to be pursued. And I'm just trying to struggle in my own mind to say that that is a unique situation, but it's absent, related to the property itself. So I'm not sure how you balance those out, but it's clearly a problem. And again, it's a public health safety issue.
Well, I think in terms of uniqueness.
Barry, if we're done with the application.
Oh, okay.
Could we motion to bring it back to the board?
Yeah, I will, if no one has any other questions, I'll move to close the public hearing portion so that we can deliberate.
We have
Second.
a public comment.
Oh,
Sorry.
Andy Krzyzmowski, I hope I pronounced that right.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't really planning to talk, but I thought I would just, if you guys have a minute, just hear a couple things. I took some notes during this process, and can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So I attend Rev City, and I often volunteer there in a capacity where we are seeing people parking out on the street, and we're seeing people with young children, elderly people cross Harvard and crosswalk Rusa to try and attend. It's really dangerous, inconvenient, are a couple terms that come to mind. And from my perspective, it's hard to see, maybe you guys commented on, the size of the building and what's being utilized. There's a lot more people and interaction going on than just the sanctuary. The kids area is actually really big. We have a really big kids attendance there with, dozens and dozens of children and staff members who work back there as well. And I can say that the congestion on Harvard is real. And we intentionally park out there just so that we can have spaces for members to attend and park as close as possible. Because again, we have a lot of people with ambulatory issues. We have a lot of people with young children, and it's really challenging. And I think that Pastor T has done a great job of bringing this to the table and letting you guys know that this is still going to look nice. It's going to maintain that green space on the east side. We have fields over there where people are practicing with their children. You know, we want this to be a space where people can attend if they want to. And right now, people are not attending at times because the parking lot is too full and it's too inconvenient. And that's definitely tough to see. We just want to be able to accommodate those who wish to attend the services when they want to. And this would be a great asset. And I think Rev City's been a great partner with the city. They provide for first responders, do a lot of mission and outreach locally and globally. You know, they serve local meals. They just do a lot of good. And so for me, I would love to see this get some more attention. And I appreciate Mr. Watkins, you know, asking about what the next steps are and what possibly could be. So I think we're brainstorming in that right direction of how can we make this happen. And I just appreciate your time and thank you so much.
I may have one more question for, I guess, staff. And I don't know this. Is there any law, rule, code that states for a certain number of parking spots, you have to have so many handicapped or disabled parking spots? And would this impact that?
Yes. So our code is basically, it has, as you provide more parking, you do need to provide more handicap accessible spaces. And so this addition will require more, and they are proposing that with this expansion. Yes.
Okay.
I guess I also have a question then. When you're considering uniqueness, are you also thinking about, like, under your consideration, thinking about the busyness of the two side streets that we're kind of talking about between Wakarusa and Harper?
Catherine could kind of back me up on this, but I don't really think so. I think it's more so just the lot itself.
It is plating or zoning. You know, staff in the report does point out that this has gone through some zoning changes since its inception. It was site planned under the old code. It has been, there was a parking update under the most recent code. So, I mean, those are zoning elements. In and of itself, you know, RM12 can constitute a lot of lot sizes, street types adjacent to it. But not every property has zoning history that affects a use that is established on the site, as it may need to continue to be utilized on the site. So there is that element of zoning.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
I'm going to restate my motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that motion.
Staff.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Kind of.
So I'll start by saying it's not fair for the church that their property is unique. I really don't. You can't blame them for growth, and I don't want to see a kid or a child or even an adult parking and getting hit and we say, we told you so. And like Barry said, this is the first time I've seen somebody say, I'll provide more parking. So I understand it doesn't meet the criteria, but this is the first time. I personally think that I would give him the variance. Because otherwise, neighbors are going to get cars parked in the street. It's going to be difficult to get in and out. A child running away from their parents, seeing a friend, another child. So
I'd add
that's...
to that, Peter. I mean, I think the first element of this variance process about the uniqueness of the property, I've found that that's the easiest element to meet most of the time. I don't have any problem looking at this property and saying that the uniqueness of the property calls for a variance. I think that's our task here today. Staff has laid out that the other four elements have been hit. But when I look at this property, I can see plenty of unique things about it. There are no other properties like this in town, shaped like this, located like this, in a particularly residential area. They obviously have strong growth in that area. So I don't have any problem finding that this particular application meets that first element, and the staff has fulfilled the rest. But that's my position on it. I think there's a lot of prevailing concerns, health, safety, wellness, you know. I think they bring up a good point, the applicant brings up a good point that it's not just now. If they continue to enhance their programming or grow, this is really more about a future problem potentially than just the existing problem. So all of these things are thoughtful, but our task is to find that those 5 elements have been met, and I don't have any problem getting there.
Patrick, I would agree with you. My only concern was the buffering and those types of things with the bushes, the trees, and making sure that that was still there, and that this wasn't going toward the east, which was the residential section. It was still kind of maintained on that southwest corner, which it is. And so
And they're putting trees and brush to separate, so.
Yeah, Wakarusa.
And the stormwater.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, overall, and no new access points, so, you know, that was another thing, no more traffic coming out of the church or going into the church, so.
As I always do, I went to the site and took a look. And if we want to talk about uniqueness, and granted, I have not visited every church in Lawrence, but I'm well familiar with the 2 synagogues and many of the churches downtown and on the east side in particular, and I'm struck by how much land there is. And so they actually have the luxury of being able to do this, which is probably not a real common thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that what they're doing now is technically in violation of the code, because I asked that question, and they're wanting to do something that would be more compliant, and as everyone else has said, clearly like a lot safer. I kind of agree. I think the uniqueness is not that big a problem. I can find it.
Yeah, I mean, ever since I read through all of it, I've been sitting here kind of thinking about that uniqueness piece of it, and I think you've got a church positioned in a place where you're really 2 sides are busy, trafficked streets, and you're in a unique position where you have the space to expand and provide safer parking, and I personally would want to support that effort.
So I'll make a motion. Are we ready to vote on it? Or-
Sounds like it.
I think so.
Okay, I'll make a motion for request variance for BZA 25002 for approval of the variance.
I'll second.
Staff would remind the board just to make sure you add, because it meets the 5 criteria in your motion.
As it meets the 5 criteria. Do you want me to repeat the whole thing again, or?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I think Barry seconded.
Oh, yeah. So the chair can call for a vote if you're ready.
Yeah, staff, could you call?
Okay, a show of hands, please. I'm showing unanimous? No?
Close.
Oh,
Close, it'll pass, but it's.
what's the number? I'm sorry.
In favor?
Favor.
Okay, sorry. Motion carries. And that was a vote of 6-1, so.
All right, thanks. I believe that's the last agenda item.
I would move to adjourn the meeting.
I have a miscellaneous item I'd like to bring up,
All right, go ahead, Barry.
if I could.
Yep.
This is just a quick FYI to the board. As you'll recall, last month, we voted to extend the time limit on a variance for 900 Pennsylvania. And I wanted to let you all know that on March 31st, there was a demolition application that was filed for that property. So, just FYI.
Okay.
Thank you, Barry. That's. So if there's no other miscellaneous items, yeah, I guess the next,
Yeah. Staff has no miscellaneous items for the board today.
all right. Then I guess,
I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
Show of hands? Count them right this time. 7-0, you can go.
Get their hands down. Stop it.
all right, thanks. I believe that concludes this.
Thank you.